And okay, I'm going to say that good morning again. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting this morning. We appreciate you being here. This is important work, and I know some of you come some distance, including myself, but it's worth it and worth to recognize you for being here and tell you how much we appreciate your input, council. You all, I think, have a copy of the agenda. A couple of housekeeping matters. One, to a special welcome to Professor Chris Hodson to my right. A member of the council was not able to be here at our opening meeting, but I wanted to introduce him, and actually I don't minutes to introduce himself, if that's okay, Chris.
That'd be fun.
Happy to have him.
Yeah. So I'm Chris Hodson. I'm a professor in the history department at BYU. I've taught at BYU for my 16th year. I work on colonial and revolutionary America as a researcher. And for the last 18 months or so, I've been a volunteer instructor at the Utah Prison Education Project. So I've taught a couple of courses at the Promontory facility at the state prison, the old state prison. One for credit, which we're very happy about. So in any case, I'm really happy to be part of the council.
Thank you, Chris. By the way, Chris was helpful in passing legislation testified at some of our committee hearings. By the way, if you didn't see it, he wrote a great op-ed about 6 months ago, and about helping those who are incarcerated and doing the work that you're all involved with. So anyway, I didn't want to put you on the spot there, Chris, but I thought it was well done. I also want to welcome Blake. Blake's not here yet.
I think we have him video off.
Okay, Blake Hills, who is with the Board of Pardons and Parole. Blake, thank you for joining us. We'll turn a few minutes to you to introduce yourself as a member of the council.
Yes, thank you. I'm Blake Hills. I've been a member of the board for about 1.5 years now. I'm standing in for Carrie Cochran, who is out of the office this morning. I have a background, 21 years as a prosecutor. Also teach for Salt Lake Community College's Law Enforcement Academy.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks again for being a part of this effort, being on the council. Rich Christiansen with the Board of Higher Education. Rich is joining us by Zoom, and he has something that was calling him away at SUU a little later. So want to recognize him as well. Just as kind of another housekeeping matter, to help us control the discussion and get some work done, we'd ask that most of our discussion here be limited to the members of the council. That isn't intended to cut anyone out of the conversation, because we're glad you're here, other members. But if we create too discussion from members who are present and have an interest, I hope you'll understand it may limit our ability to get through the agenda. But occasionally, something really critical, raise your hand and the chair will call on you. So I'm going to, chair is going to have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting held Wednesday, July 27th. I think you've all received a copy. Roxanne, you have a motion to approve the minutes? Say yes. Good job. Okay, do we have a second, please? Second that, Dave. We'll place that for a vote. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries and the minutes are approved. Before I undertake the next matter on the agenda, that's our meeting schedule, I'd like to turn some time and let him something that happened yesterday that I thought me and maybe some of the others who attended. Senator.
Thank you, Representative. We had an opportunity to go out to the new facility with the prison, and some of us, and look at the education facilities that are there. We wanted to get eyes on what was made possible, and that's part of the work that many of you do. Saw some of you there, and David, and others who joined us, the three chairs. We got to meet with prison leadership, corrections administration, and talk to those who are involved in education, or everyone at both sides, Gunnison and Salt Lake City. There was going to be an hour or two. We had a great lunch from their culinary arts program. They ended up 3 or 4 hours and could have stayed longer. So much to see out there. They are in challenges with their moving into a new program. But sometimes, you just have to start the journey. You can't know that every key is not going to work or every gate's not going to function exactly right until you just jump in. So Department of Corrections is in the middle of that. They feel like they're in a bit of a crisis right now with the work, but I think they're going to get on top of it soon. And the discussion surrounding higher education was the best I've been a part of, and it was really encouraging for me to have everybody, all stakeholders input. And there's great work going on down at the press to see what you guys are doing there, and how that can springboard into this work that this council is about. So it was a great meeting. I hope that we can return there again, and we saw some challenges. We know where maybe some of the hot spots are, but courses are going forward. Utilizing the space we have. We were a little disappointed in the education space for square footage that this $1 billion project doesn't include, but that's because none of us weighed in early enough for it. I guess you did, but it was 2 parts in the road, Representative. So we really felt like there should be more education spaces. They have flexibility, though. They have a lot of chapel and other things that they can use for education. All in all, a really good meeting, and good to collaborate and network with UDC.
Thanks, Senator, and Representative Ballard was there. Representative Ballard, anything to add?
I just think the collaborative efforts were great. We also discussed and iPads, and really what higher ed has been discussing, COVID especially, is how to use our buildings effectively and also technology effectively. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think the most important thing is that I got from the meeting is we need everybody to be proactive. We need everybody to say, here's our wish list. Here's what we can do, because otherwise we don't know what's at the table. So we need you to bring to us, here's what we would like to see happen, and then we'll consider how everything's at the table of how to implement it. So glad to see everybody at the table today.
Thanks, Representative. And just let me reiterate, one of the great things about this council and having legislative involvement is when we talk about what's needed, these good folks are going to be able to take that message to the legislature. And that's not just about enactments, that's about accessing resources. And when I say that, we're talking about the dollars of money that makes things happen. And I know these 2 people, including myself, are incredibly committed to supporting what you all have done and doing more. Anyway, it was a great meeting. I want to see if Dr. Ice and Andy attended, representing University of Utah, on some of the work you've been doing. Do you have any comments about your thoughts?
Well, I thought we had a really good discussion. I especially appreciated the security team being there to start resolving some of the issues that would happen when you open up a new prison and there's new rules and regulations So in particular, I was glad to have you all there to be in that discussion and to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing, to get access to the classrooms for students to have the materials they need to be successful, and just appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thanks for your input and your good questions. Dan, anything to that?
Other than it was just a really great day, like you say, I appreciate the chairs all taking the time to come visit with us and see some of the things that we're up against, but also some of the really good things that are happening.
Well, I've got to tell you, I talked all day about what it looks like. For me, being able to see it, to actually be able to see the classrooms, to see the computer setups, the screens that they're going to be working, and the Culinary Arts Center, which is a large kitchen, but you can tell the environment is set up to become help these people to become professionals in food preparation. And then for me, one of the more interesting places, the auto mechanics, the welding, that big complex. It was great. And so Andrea's here in perfect timing. I just want to acknowledge Andrea and her staff for welcoming us to the corrections facility yesterday. She was a great host, answered all our questions, and I just want you to know that was, maybe I'm the only one. I don't think I was. I think we all came away impressed and more appreciative of issues that you all have to deal with. So thank you.
It was completely my pleasure. It was great to have you guys. It made my day way more fun than my average day. So thanks for giving me a day off, if you will, sort of. And you can see it's just a complicated system. There's a lot of logistics inherent in providing education in that setting.
Yeah.
But it's also really important. It's, you know, a big driver of why I do the work I do. I love it.
Well, thank you. This was my first time. I'd gone out there for the ribbon cutting. I didn't do the tour. This is the first time kind of looking around. Place is huge. And I told Senator Owens, if I was an inmate there and escaped out of one of the buildings, I'd be lost because I'd have no idea where to go. You know, it's an amazing facility, and I'm glad that we have dedicated what we have towards educational pursuits. So anyway,
Can I say one more thing there? Sure. With this group, what if possible is so encouraging. But without the collaboration and work with the Department of Corrections, we would just be stonewalled. So Andrea, we talked afterwards yesterday. You are the right person there, and we're really grateful that you had us.
You guys are making me feel bashful. Thank you. You're super kind.
well, we appreciate it. And by the way, if you need another day off, just call and say, hey, organize another tour.
Sounds good.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is the meeting schedule and proposed meeting schedule. Leadership, the chairs have met with Jared and we've kind of reviewed the balance of this year, and we don't want to overload anyone. And the worst meeting to be held is those that aren't necessary. So we decided with the remaining meetings this year to cut them in, essentially create 2 meetings. So we're proposing an October 5th meeting at 9 a.m. and a November 9th meeting at 9 a.m. and completing the year that way. And then we'll at some point be looking at scheduling for the. Is that okay with y'all? We also wanted to leave a little more time. So we'll conclude our meeting today and we'll have a little more time for those that would be preparing for a presentation or work before our next meeting. So with that, I'd accept a motion to approve those dates for the 2 meetings for the balance this year. Thank you, David. Set your motion. Don't be shy. Are you okay with those dates, David?
I feel like I'm always jumping in and got your back.
All right. So we have a motion to approve those dates. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chris. All in the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries, and Jared will calendar those accordingly. Thank you. So, Jared is the next item, going to help with the next item on the agenda. He's going to take just a few minutes, about 5, and review for us the statute. We'll get into more details behind the scenes or behind these broad issues later in our work. So Jared, would you mind giving us the overview?
Yeah, thank you. And, as long as I'm looking at, Dr. Bachman went here, it's good to see you. So yesterday too.
It was wonderful to bump into you guys even in that context of working out.
Yeah, looks like you're gonna be in good health, so.
Yeah, it's exciting for us. We're so grateful. I echo the sentiment of appreciation for programming, specifically Lieutenant Ellers and Sergeant Dunberg have been putting in long hours to help our programs get up and running in that new facility. We started admitting and orienting new students on Monday at 7 a.m. and went all day. We did that yesterday. We are doing that today. My colleague, Dr. Bradbury, who we met last week, was there with the ladies. We admitted 99 new students in the male population in general education, or general population yesterday. Today we anticipate 77 ladies joining college today.
Wow.
So we're very excited about the future out there, despite the challenges which we all recognize
Thank you.
are pretty intense. So thank you.
So do you mind if I just ask a question, because I was curious. I think that's significant, the 99 and the 77. Is the 77 part of the 99?
No, so 99 male students were
Okay.
admitted yesterday and Monday. 77 we anticipate females will be, or women, I should say, admitted today. So what we're thinking is that with the established students that we can access in the general population, that this first fall semester, which we will have a delayed start, but we'll catch up. But we will have between 250 and 300 active students in college.
And so these are additional to what you've been doing.
Yes, there are. Now it's a little complicated because we were with the COVID lockdowns. We weren't with the men in general population since 2020 for the most part, just a few classes here and there. And we had moved into the promontory facility where we were offering most of our classes. Education will no longer be offered there. They're going to use it specifically for programming that is state mandated in order to help these and enter back into mainstream society. So we lost a lot of our students that are still there.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, thank you for it's good to run into you all.
So at the last meeting, Senator Owens asked us each to take some time between meetings and look at the statute. We sent the link out to that after the meeting. And so just as a brief review of the highlights here, in House Bill 226, this is the one that was that formed this council. It was sponsored by Representative Snow and Senator Owens. Provides for this council. So he's outlined brief. First, advise and report to the Board of Higher Education, the Department of Corrections, the Education Interim Committee, and the Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee. So in statute, as far as the meeting schedule goes, we will be providing the first of those reports at the November interim committee meeting. And then again, when the session is underway to the appropriations, higher education appropriations. As far as the duties, in a nutshell, the umbrella responsibility there is integration and productive deployment upon release. Included in some of those things that are outlined there are evidence-based practices, accessibility to education during incarceration, timely completion of courses, certificates, and degrees, and what we as a council are asked to do is provide recommendations to coordinate things and address some of these issues. Occupations are important, accessible, sustainable occupations that are aligned with workforce demands. Cross-institutional coursework, in other words, if somebody begins at one facility in a particular institution, the ability to cross into other institutions. Personal and civic development, innovative course delivery, including technology. Representative Ballard mentioned technology yesterday's visit. And data, recommendations for what kind of data can and ought to be considered, including enrollment, completion, financial aid, costs, recidivism, employment, education, and so on. So that's a summary of the duties in the statute for this council. And we'll add to that, we also linked this Representative Ballard's bill that established some criteria for and career readiness with the Department of Corrections. And the first of those was that education be made available as soon as possible upon the development of inmates' case action plan. Second, to have substantially equivalent opportunities for both women and men. Third, access to grants, financial aid, and financial aid applications for the students. Fourth, the continuity of their education and the consideration of inmate transfers to between facilities, discipline issues, lockdown, and so forth. Fifth, addressing educational records, asking or calling for the department to maintain records on students and inmates' financial, or excuse me, educational progress, and to provide for those records to be transferred to any institution that the student might designate, as well as to the student themselves. And finally, to report to the Higher Education Subcommittee on enrollment, completion, recidivism, transfers, recommendations for needed resources, and so forth. Did I get that right, Representative Ballard?
Got it.
Okay, now we'll know we got it right when we're doing it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think communicating that with all the staff and programming as we make plans is crucial.
So that's a summary of the statute and the bills that fall with corrections education. Mr. Chair, any your discussion or?
Any questions for Jared? This is always kind of a good idea to review this because it's always good for us to say what is our purpose? What are we about? What is our map? And so, especially early on where we're getting our feet wet and understanding what our roles are, it's good to review. Next item on the agenda is to review issues for council vision and priorities. This is yours. So would you mind taking that on?
Yeah. So again, after the last meeting, one of our challenges was to go back and consider what are some of the issues and priorities that we as a council feel need to be considered and addressed. So the approach we took on that was I sent each of you a summary of some of the input that we had received prior to the meeting and combined that with some of the things we discussed in the last meeting and invited you and others that have been interested in the council's activities to provide input on those. So rather than go into the detail of that, this might be an opportunity if any of you have any questions or clarifications about some of the input that you had. What I have done is taken those items and integrated them into the work plan we're going to be reviewing, and potentially appointing subcommittees or work groups to address each of those kinds of issues. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken, and maybe we can just pause and see if there are any questions or other issues that want to bring up. I'm sure that other issues as we get further to the work plan.
So Jared, all of us that receive the work plan, are those embedded in the vision into the work plan?
Yeah, we've taken all those issues.
Okay. Oh, please, Richard.
I just, last meeting, the primary concern that came to me is making sure we just have the motivation systems correct to make sure that this is, going to happen. And so just in the priorities, wanting to make sure that we some form or fashion. The big issue that came to mind last time for me is the motivation of moving prisoners from one facility to another because of beds. And so I just want to make sure that we actually have the financial component of it, which feels like it may be the very root that we're addressing.
So Richard, for my benefit, I think I know where you're going, but put some detail. Maybe other.
Well, last time we talked about chasing cats and all the cats that can run around and catch.
That
And
was
boy,
Senator Owen's little film, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a terrible cat catcher, and furthermore, I don't like cats very much. So as I thought through that, it's like, well, what's the very root? How can we get to it where we don't get the cats out in the first place? And the conclusion that I kind of came to is if we can get the financial systems aligned so that yeah, I'm not articulating it well, but the financial systems aligned so that we're not getting the cats out in the first place. The problem that I saw that really jumped out last time, and I'm very new to this, was moving prisoners from one facility to another based on financial considerations. And so I just think getting to the root of this in the form of the financial motivations, if we can address that, we may get a few less cats out.
Okay, it's coming back to me now. Andrea, one part of our discussion was sometimes, as I understand it, as I recall, there are needs to move prisoners to different locations. But my impression is there was an effort to, in those, there was an effort by you folks in making those changes to take into account the education pursuits or their personalized plans, so to speak. So am I headed the right direction? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two separate issues, because one is, do we have the right financial incentives that would align with the interest of our students? And I think there's a lot going for us in that, in terms of having federal grant funding, right, available in the form of a Pell Grant. Like, that's awesome and new for us and will be really helpful. There's also mandatory time cuts that come with vocational certifications. I'd really like to see us work with the board to figure out how we can provide those time cuts for people that are getting associate's and bachelor's degrees, because that's probably the hardest certification to receive, right? It takes the most effort. So but I do think that we have a lot of incentives that drive education and support it. I think where we are challenged is, it's not so much the economics are sort of one component of why we use jails, but it's really about staffing shortages, right? We need those jails to help be our overflow mechanism, because we don't have the staff to open the entire new state correctional facilities. We're kind of at a partial capacity and are grateful for and very much relying on the jails to help us fit some of our people so that we can continue to be operational and safe, right? So it's not just economic drivers. The jails get the benefit. They do get, there's a tiered rate system they receive for housing and providing programming opportunities for the people that are in the prison system, but I think it's a mutually beneficial agreement in lots of ways. I just want to make sure I'm sort of providing context.
And if I could make the comment, I think generally it's just getting to the motivation drivers rather than the specifics. I brought that as one specific, but if we have individuals that are a week or two away from completing a certificate, and then we move them quickly to another facility, This is just one small example of it that kind of highlighted it. If we shift them to another facility because of, oh, we need beds filled down there for an economic reasons. I get the security reason, but that feels like it's very penny wise, pound foolish. And so I would just encourage us in whatever our priorities are, is if we could drive to the root causes, which oftentimes, from my experience, it does end up being financial drivers. And
Thanks, Rich. That certainly helps me. And Andrea.
I'll have a comment on that, Rich, and I thank you for keeping your eye on this, because our county jails are part of they're kind of a shock absorber system for Department of Corrections. So they kind of go up and down. But what we talked about yesterday, we saw the tablets and what this council is going to help us decide and brainstorm. Can that tablet move with them? And until you're a week away, there's just a seamless transition. You need to continue your work to finish that up, so that penny driver or whatever the financial motivation to make sure we have county jails help and that they're staffed. Well, then that's not messing up the education of one of our inmates. So we can do it, but it's going to take this council to help figure that out. So then everybody knows the plan going forward. UDC has to move inmates occasionally, and sometimes it's at their request, being closer to their families or whatever that might be. But education is far from equal in all of our locations, and we need to help balance that.
Thank you.
I had a real quick follow-up.
Sure.
On that, if I could. As I shared with you, we held on Monday and Tuesday, I guess, 6 admission and orientation meetings throughout the day. In every single one of those on the part of the offenders was precisely this: getting into a program, starting it, and then being moved to another facility. I have to say that it was in those moments, as they expressed those concerns, I was pleased to be able to talk about Representative Ballard and the work that was done with her House Bill 194. I was able to talk about that. Was able to talk about Deputy Warden Jackson and the fact that he called me twice on my cell phone last semester and said, give me names of students who've been moved down into Gunnison. I will do what I can to see if I can get them back into your classes. To be able to share that in the context of those meetings, it gave a lot of comfort and it gave some motivation for them to keep going. So I just wanted to acknowledge the work that has been done in this. And I do believe that it is, and I assured them as such, I have seen it, it is getting better. It truly is. Now, will we lose students throughout the semester? Yes, and I told them that will happen. I said, so do what you're asked to do. Go where they tell you to go, and then we will work with corrections to try to get you back so that you can complete.
Terrific. Thanks very much for that. And I was just going to add to what you said about what Senator Owens said about the tablets. There are now tablets, 1 for every 2 inmates. And we talked yesterday about the educational resources that can be loaded on those. And I think it was Dan, you or President Darren, who said, for example, for those who are in a welding program, they can do most of their book work on a tablet. And if they're moved to Purgatory down in my county, that's the correctional facility. I don't know what you mean. I shouldn't have used that as an example. But anyway, they still need to certify with the hands-on welding. But if we can coordinate with Dixie Technical College, who has the facility, and we can move them once they finish their work on the tablet or their book learning, and even if they've been transferred, if that's what's left, coordinating with our applied technology colleges to help them finish that certification. And I think there's a good spirit of coordination that way. And I think it was Dan said, we've got one county sheriff that's really involved in supporting those kind of things. So,
Yeah, I
Representative,
just want to mention something we talked about yesterday that I think will be a game changer for the inmates, for completion, for being able to fulfill what's now in statute. We discussed having a higher ed counselor actually be assigned to each of the inmates. Because right now they have a caseworker, but their role is not really how can we help you finish your education. So I think Senator Owens and I will work on that to be able to help provide funding, and we can work with higher ed to be able to get those counselors. But I think what that will do is help the bridge so that when somebody comes into prison, they actually at the onset say, I was in this field, I need to consider a different field because of my felony now, or this is what my education is. I'm ready for the next one, or I need to fulfill this before I can move on to that. I think having the higher ed counselor, just like we have in the higher ed institutions, will really help to facilitate what are your goals, what are your interests, you in a timely manner in the right programs as soon as in statute, coordinating. I just think that is an important element, and the corrections itself is now in the process of hiring somebody to help oversee the educational programming, but it has to be in conjunction with somebody from higher ed. So that may be another consideration that we also need as legislators, to have somebody at the higher level to help the overall goals and collaboration, and then the individual counselors to help the individual programming and follow through, not just while they're in corrections and their goals while they're there, but when they get out, to help them either the completion when they get out or the jobs that are related to it with workforce services. I think the discussion we had yesterday in this counselor setting, I think is going to help a lot of things. So I think getting back to what's on our agenda, I think a lot of our purpose today is to say, okay, right now, how can we move forward with what our plans are and our implementation? Because I think our goals are now set. Now we get to figure out how are we going to follow through, and how can we help support with the counselors that are needed.
thank you, Representative. Let's go to Aden. I apologize, Aden.
Oh, no
I want to say
worries.
something, but I'm seeing something different on the screen.
Yeah, no, it's pronounced Eden, and if you ever been to Canada and you say and then you use the word then and you put it together, Eden, and then there you have my name.
I like that. I'll do better next time.
That's right. Thank you, Representative. So I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. And I apologize if this was redundant and it was addressed in prior meetings, mainly around the tablets. And just for my visualizing purposes around, if a student is put on hold, has a hold, and this person is going to be moved to a different facility, at what point are their belongings confiscated while they're moving in transit? And then at what point are those belongings are released to this individual? And I'm just trying to figure out in terms of like the downtime of this person having that tablet before they're hold and after they're hold, and then at the new facility before they actually even touch the tablet.
I mean, my understanding is their property was like within 24 hours, so that's not a huge setback for us. And I just want to remind our processes that we put educational holds, or so we try to create protections around people getting moved when the program. It's just that it doesn't always work because safety and security always trumps whatever, right? So there's a lot of DPO prison operation officers that override our holds. What's interesting and good moving forward is that we're going to start tracking that, so we can, if we're seeing patterns, we can have those conversations with prison operations that sort of says, oh, there's a lot of, overrides of our educational rules of what's going on. I think that might shift the conversation. I also want to recognize that the Division of Prison Operations they're developing a new sort of mission and vision that is the same, which is we want to make sure that every movement is purposeful and that it advances the best interest of the individual, and it's not just about a free bed space. And I think now that they've sort of put that out there, I want to be part of holding them accountable, just as I want them to hold me accountable to my mission, right? But we have to have a shared vision in order for this to work, because otherwise we're just working apart, right? We're working against each other. So I think it's those conversations, the hard conversations with prison operations repeatedly, and then holding each other accountable to our own vision and mission and making sure that it's shared and we're working collaboratively. That's gonna be a piece of it. And we started it, right? Like, we're on the path. It's gonna take some time. And we only had this one historic prison move. So the dust is starting to settle, and I don't think it's gonna be quite as tumultuous as it's been. I hope. Right?
Yeah, no, as I shared, I've seen it improve year by year. And I agree with the dust settling, and that will have a significant impact as happening. So thank you again for the work on that. We're seeing benefit.
Yeah, I've used your language in statute with DPO that says, we have this, we've been given this directive in statute. And I've made a lot of calls like, we'd like this person back, please bring, because they're 2 semesters away, and I would love to see them complete this certification.
So I think it would be helpful, since all of this is new, everybody's now at the table, it may be helpful for each of you to kind of take notes, and then at another time, make a list of the barriers that you see and your recommendations or your goals, and then submit them, so that, because we have a lot of little details, we love this detail, so write down with your barriers that you, from your perspective, and then your goals or your recommendations. And then we can compile all of those and with checklists kind of start working through those. But I think for this body, I think with all of this newness, that's what I would suggest, so that we can address those details. But while we're in this meeting for today, I think we have some overall things to do. And so take notes of things that you'd like to help communicate.
Yes.
So I think that's a great segue into what we're doing next. As far as what talked about, it sounds like it's important to not only how we address the financial issues for education, but for the broader, how do we make the system or help the system do what it needs to facilitate that. So with that, if you'd like to get into the work plan.
I think, Jared, you're right. I think that is a perfect segue. So let's turn the time to you on item 6. So our agenda formulation of the work plan. So
Okay.
why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah, attached to your agenda, let's see. Turn on the screen here. Attached to your agenda that was sent out is the proposed work consulted with the chairs. And tried to integrate the feedback that we've had from council members on this. But to me, it seems like if we could start off with what's our overarching objective, what are we really trying to do here? That perhaps could help guide our conversations and our efforts from that. As I look at the statute and what is going on there, I would like to suggest that zooming on that, see it better. But I would like to suggest that we consider adopting a guiding objective that is what actions and funding need to be applied for higher education and corrections facilities to yield the highest likelihood of sustainable employment with the least likelihood of recidivism. And in suggesting that, there are get distracted. We could go down pathways of let's think of that kind of technology or this kind of educational program or that kind of thing, which may or may not help or be the best thing and sustainable employment. And I think, and as far as the commissioner is concerned, in our team and our discussions that we've had here, and as far as the state is concerned, we whatever we can and have it be something that will help with and with sustainable employment. But all the rest might just be ancillary to that. But we might also find that some of the things that we're looking at help recidivism, and if they do, then yes, we can do that. So I don't know if that's the appropriate way to do that is in form of a motion, that we can discuss it, or
I think so. But what I'd like to do with that, this opening statement or the guiding objectives is something that the chairs, the three of us have worked on along with Jared. But if you all take a look at that and see, this is obviously something that can be amended or changed, but just comments about that and whether you feel like that's an appropriate statement to define what we're about or what our mission, our objective is. Any comments or thoughts? Are you okay with that?
I'm not quite articulate, but I think, to my mind anyway, one of the sort of best practices in prison education is to make the prison education setting resemble, in as much as that's possible, the higher education setting that our students might encounter at the university, Utah, or wherever else. And I think these are really good and laudable objectives, and I buy into them really pretty wholeheartedly. That all being said, I don't think I would ever say to my students that I teach, at BYU or elsewhere, the reason I'm doing this is so that you can get a job and not go to jail. So there are civic benefits associated with higher education and so forth that I think are really profound and meaningful. And so in some respects, I would love to see, and I don't quite know what the language is, I've just encountered this kind of thing. I don't quite know what the language is. But it would be interesting to me to kind of think through objectives and maybe even language to insert into something like this that expresses some of that broader sense of what higher education can mean to a person and to the society in which they live.
Thank you. Good comments. Other comments?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Thank you, Christopher. I agree with what you shared there. In fact, in our conversations the past couple of days, drawing back on that, a question was asked a few times. They made some earning an associate's degree with Salt Lake Community College. In what way will that help us get a job when we're out there? And I had to explain to them, an associate's degree in science is not necessarily going to lead immediately to some career where you will be able to earn lots and lots of money. And so I actually referred them back to what Davis Tech is doing. And I said, really, if we can get you involved with academic studies and if we get you involved with some trade and vocational skills, that is going to work together to be able to not only help you get a job through the vocational training, but it's through the academic studies in anthropology and history and political science where we come together and we learn to see the world differently. That allows you to get a job and keep it, per se, because now you know how to interact with your fellow employees. They see the world politically very differently. Yet you're able to interact and have constructive dialogues with those individuals because you practiced that in our classes. So to me, that's the power of it, is that higher education on that front, it changes the way that we see ourselves in the world in which we act, which allows offenders to get the vocational job if that's where they're going, but then not just be able to keep it because they've developed those critical thinking skills and the social skills to be able to attain that.
Thank you.
Can I add?
Sure. Please.
Yeah, I concur with everything that's being said. I think one of the biggest things that I think about as I had an opportunity to engage with former incarcerated students and then also incarcerated students across different states. One of the things that we often see is the opportunity for students to have not only the skills to find a job, but also the language and the confidence to continue beyond, CT education, right? And that's very important to give the students the opportunity. If I think about higher education, let's think about how we do higher education, right? We provide students with opportunities and the paths that they could take. So if someone decides to do community college and then transfer later, or someone wants to do a CTE degree, they could do it. But if someone wants to actually go and get a bachelor's, that's possible, right? So we have to think about that as we move forward, as creating these opportunities, the same opportunities that students outside have, right? In general, some students might, some incarcerated students might see the benefit of higher education, some might not. But I think we just have to create that opportunity for them as they move along their educational trajectory, they start seeing those benefits as we've seen in the past in multiple settings.
Thank you. Richard?
Yes, I love these strategic priorities, but I think we are missing one key thing, and that is what should we stop doing? I'd love to see the data, and I'd love to see the outcomes of what are we doing that isn't working, and let's stop doing that and then shift to what we ought to be doing. So inclusive in that, my experiences in higher education and oftentimes in bigger business, the tendency is just keep adding, but more and equally important is to stop.
Thank you, Richard. Other comments? Jared?
Mr. Chair, I'd be very interested in any thoughts that our former student might have who's been through this experience as to what we ought to be trying to do. Education.
Do you mind, Alexa?
Well, the barriers that I've come across, even though I have the education and stuff, a lot of jobs frown upon felons. So, your associates, your masters, that felony puts that stamp on you where they just pretty much brush you off. That's been an issue with me because I've been trying, I have, the job that I have right now with my family and my fiance's business. But what if down the road I want to go something bigger, my business, I want to start my own business, with my felony, that's an issue. How do we fix that? How do they say, okay, we can give you a loan despite you have the felony, you know what I mean? Like, felony would be the stop point of my business or my goals or my ambitions that I have further on.
Because there's background checks for jobs.
Correct, there is. And I know there's companies that will accept, felons, but they're not well paid despite the education I have because of the felon. So that's what I'm running into.
That's helpful. Thanks, Roxanne. Other comments about the guiding objectives that we got there, and I think we've had some really good comments. And I don't want to cut off the discussion prematurely, but I think what I'm hearing from Chris and the others is that's a real kind of a pragmatic statement that there's more to education perhaps for those, and I think that's what you were saying, David, the humanistic values that we gain through education that will help sustain them. If I'm a welder, I've got to have more than maybe just those skills to keep my job. And that's one of the reasons we build into the legislation, civic engagement, civic duties, and that sort of thing. There's more to that. I think from a practical standpoint, we kind of bare bone this because we, as legislators, we have to convince our colleagues that there's value to this, and this should never be the bottom line, but so many times it is the bottom line about we're going to save money because of recidivism, and we're going to save money because these candidates are going to be able to get jobs and become productive. But I agree with you, there is more to that, and I'm wondering if it'd be okay with everyone if you allow the chairs and Jared to take another crack at this and see if we can incorporate some of those humanistic things. Is that right, Jared? Or you got
Put a couple of words in here, and I don't know
Okay.
if what we're after, but what actions of plan apply or discontinued for higher education in corrections facilities to yield the highest likelihood of sustainable employment with the least likelihood of recidivism in a, I need a word there, someone can help with it, in a environment, if that captures what we're trying to, trying to suggest there. And one of the thoughts I have on, if we're worried about education that doesn't lead to a specific occupation or a certificate or something like that, one of my thoughts on that is that if our objective is keeping them out of being productive in society, the job is part of that. And if part of keeping that job, it's great to have a job and be trained as a and have a job as a welder. But if part of keeping that job or any other kind of job is increased by some other kinds of education you've had, I think that ought to be part of it. And so again, a reference to recidivism and sustainable employment.
I like what you've done, but my recommendation is let's maybe still explore that a little bit and see if we can't come back. And I don't want to overdo it, but I think there are some humanistic type values that are valuable. And I know that's repetitive, but and I don't want to say education for education's sake, but an educated person is more than just their competency in a narrow area. What you're getting at, Representative?
Yeah, so any business has at least two kinds of objectives. One of them is, what is it that we want the public to know? What is it that we want our employees to know or feel, right? So I think we may end up with 2 or 3 different objectives. One of them would be a legislative objective, one may be an inmate objective, and one may be the higher ed staff objective, right? Or community objective, however we want to do it. So I think for having chairs come back and kind of talk about those different objectives, I think make more sense than trying to get everybody's objective into one, because we all have a little different objective, I think, in how we're approaching it and how, because we really want the inmates. I love the cover of All Our Friends Are Felons with the learning how to play the violin. I've never known how to do that. I need somebody to teach me. Many of the felons don't know how to live in society. They need somebody to teach them how to be a productive member of society. So I think let's go back and figure out if we have different objectives.
That would be my recommendation. But further, I'd encourage any of you to take that text and help us. So put we used to say a pen, but get on your keyboard and see if you can soften the edges a little bit to include those things. And I'm not good at articulating either. I think we also have a sense of what it is. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. We would appreciate your help. If you can get those to Jared before in the next few weeks, that would be helpful. Okay.
We'll provide some suggested language and for you guys to consider.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think that's what the data says, is that the reason that education is so powerful for incarcerated individuals is not just because it their employability, but it reduces risk in other pathways. And the more education they obtain while incarcerated, the more that risk reduction happens. So I think it's, the data bears out that it's, multifaceted.
So what you just said is really helpful.
Yeah.
So getting back to what our role as lawmakers to the data, then that becomes very powerful. Yeah. So help us out there.
And if we could add, sorry to interrupt, families to some extent, it might really go well with our community here.
Yeah.
And to give a specific real life example, one of our students in a communications course, she stood up and she said, I was raised in this prison. And she said, my father and my mother, they were both incarcerated, and they used me as a child to smuggle in contraband. I was raised here. She now has a 4.0, and she calls her children on a regular basis and encourages them, stay in school, stay in high school. It's the most important thing you can do. So I know we're all on the same page on this, but if there was a way perhaps to incorporate the impact that this has on generations in our mission, it might be helpful to the community.
Yeah. Sure. And those are some great suggestions, and just inspire all of us. Those suggestions suggestions. I'll also read from the chat, from Dan, some suggestions. What actions and funding need to be applied for higher education and corrections facilities to provide access to educational opportunity, incarceration, and yield the highest likelihood of sustainable employment with these elected. Anyway, so just some good examples. We'll appreciate some of that input. We'll do some wordsmithing and come up with something.
We'll bring something back. So you can capture those chat.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jared, we'll let you continue.
Go for it. Yeah, I just want to recognize Trina Weller, who's our assistant, and has done a lot of work in supporting some of the logistics of our council. With that, let's move on to the strategic priorities. It seems like it's easy for us to go in a lot of different directions, cat herding, right? But it seems like if we can figure out what are our approaches going to be, I envision a two-pronged approach for our council, at least for this year. And one is the long-term approach. What's our strategic vision? Let's find out what we ought to be in corrections in Utah. And to do that, let's look at evidence-based practice, national research, what's going on in other states that has worked well, what do we know from our own data, as well as lived experience. Let's hear from some folks like Roxy, including Roxy, that have had some experience in the system and what works and what are the impacts that have worked on. So first of all, a strategic look at what are that are known to work as we look around. And then our second piece at the same time is to take and look at what are the short-term things that are needed right now and that are desired, that we want to do, that are achievable this year. Are there some funding things? Are there some tablet things? Are there some enrollments or process things that we can take on this year and so to address those, I would like to suggest that it is as early as our next meeting, if possible, we find some folks that on our council or that are known by our council to have some experience in this field to come back and share some of the research on some of the best practices and maybe give us a scope of where we ought to be looking. At the same time, issues that we've been talking about here today, as well as in the outline that we've sent around, let's maybe designate some work groups and take a particular set of those and ferret out what are the things that we can or ought to be working on this year that we can achieve and make a difference between now and the legislative session, and what direction we ought to be heading for that. So I would like to suggest that as an approach. Start with the best practices with the long term, and also at the same time have some help with folks identifying.
So if you look down at number 7 on the agenda, that was a good segue into that. So thanks, Jared. I think from my perspective, because I'm really learning, I said this to Andrea and the group today, is a lot, but there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot you all know more than I know. But there's also probably people throughout the country who know more than maybe some of us. And so because we have this unique opportunity right now, with the progress we're making, it goes back to my days as a prosecutor. You don't want to narrow things too soon. You want to make sure that we're taking into the whole field our work. And so I think it would be wise for us to invest in some looking at what's been done. One of the things I've learned as a legislature is we don't have to necessarily recreate the wheel if someone else has been to the forefront and has data either for success or sometimes for failure. We can take advantage of that. So, Chris, your assigned position on the statute is to this member of the council as helping with that issue. You know, it's actually part of your definition. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we ask Chris to head up this working group because it's consistent with the statute that's in place. But I'd also like to say, if anyone else would like to be a part of that, and they can be a member of the council or they cannot be. And I know we have some resources in our state who have a lot of background in that. But rather than us say who shouldn't, open it up, and you don't have to say now, but if you could get to Jared, someone you would recommend to be part of that working group within the next week or two, I'd really appreciate it. You make a nomination yourself or someone else that you think. So the idea is, and Senator Owens he's done some looking at other states, things that are, at least from our perspective, appear well. I didn't fully appreciate, I knew Andrea had an amazing background, her title, programs director, is much broader. I didn't really fully appreciate until we talked yesterday. But you have the benefit of your experience and also your education at this. So that we have a wealth of talent that we can utilize here in the state. Let's get maybe that group organized and then have the chair outline a plan of action. And then, as Jared said, see, maybe it's too soon, but if we could put that together before our next meeting, have that come back for a presentation so that we don't that we don't fail to take advantage of this opportunity, and that we don't, and I've seen this happen in legislative experience, we get down the road 2 years and we realize we took an intuitive action, but it wasn't based on good evidence. And so you have to back up, and you've lost time, and sometimes you lose money. So anyway, that's my thinking. Is that okay with everyone? We take not a timeout, but that we have this group working on the side to help us with that issue. Chris, what do you think?
That's just fine, and I have a number of people wanting this in the room right now. It'd be perfect fits for that.
Okay, all right. So,
and I would say one thing that's really important for your recommendations to us is actually be able to coordinate numbers that they have. And if it's not in the past, then at least start it now, of knowing where inmates are, what's our potential for education. We discussed yesterday, they enter, that there could be a short education, kind of a few questions that the caseworker could help fill out that would say, I have my high school education, or knowing if they need additional math, or whether if they are needing a different occupation or different skills, or just need some higher education or tech or whatever it is. I think being able to know how many we have, how many could take advantage of education, but also right now, the most important thing is how many spots are we actually filling right now? Because I think if, like the culinary was great with 20 spots, but it takes 5 months and that doesn't go very far, right? So how can we, with what we have, really, how can you direct us for providing education to a larger group of inmates? But I think they can't do that without your numbers and being able to evaluate that. That's where your expertise, research, and thinking would be helpful. And comparing the space, I think that's what we talked about. How can we utilize our space the best? iPads are a big part of that. But if we don't have your data, I think it's really hard to move forward.
Data and research. Yeah. You had a comment.
Well, so we do, I explained last week last meeting, sorry, that we do have of our population has a high school diploma or equivalent. However, a lot of that data, 30% of it is missing. So and then also when you dig into those who in fact have that level of education, many of them are ill-prepared and don't have the literacy to back up being fully ready to take advantage of what we're providing. And then my other comment is this: I don't think we've ever gotten close to capacity, right? In terms of like educational opportunities or spots that are filling all of them. And I would love to see us I would love to have a conversation. How do we, accommodate all this demand? I believe there's, and I don't know what's driving this. I mean, I have some hypotheses, but there's probably a lot more opportunity available than we're actually connecting to individuals in those spots. Does that resonate with you guys?
It does, and I was kind of saving this comment perhaps for a little bit more as to what we will address in the future. But to build on that, as long as we're discussing that, one of the biggest concerns that I have is that we do not overburden a correctional system that is already struggling with this new move. I'm sure we all saw the articles that came out recently in the Tribune. They're accurate with the challenges that we're seeing, both in terms of Salt Lake Community College, and I work part-time as a chaplain for corrections, and I've been in the chapels on Sunday. There's a lot of discouragement. There's a lot of challenge that we're facing. So yes, there's lots of space in that new facility. But to quote Director Nielsen in one of those articles, we are driving our corrections staff and officers, he said, into the ground because they are working 60 to 80-hour weeks because of the staffing shortage. So I would think that one of the most important things that we can do as moving forward is to make sure that we are coordinating our efforts so that we're not duplicating things that aren't necessary. For example, it's important that we as Salt Lake Community College aren't going in and offering, although we could, and duplicating what Davis Tech is doing. It's already happening. So, with July of next year, we will have Pell generally restored. And there are four-year institutions that we are excited to have been for years to come in and complete the work that we have started and build upon. So coordinating our efforts so that we, as we have this general education established and we have graduates and we will have at least 300 students taking classes, I believe, by the end of this year, working on their general education, that then the University of Utah or other institutions will come in and we will have coordinated a two model where general education has been taken care of because of our service area at Salt Lake Community College, and we've been doing this work, and then institutions that can complete that with a bachelor's degree. We are able to coordinate with them and they are able to come in and pick up our students and push those that want to forward. I think that coordinating that and not overburdening by duplication will be very important for this council.
And if that's the only thing we accomplished in 1 year, I'd be delighted. We just had, a bachelor's certification. That would be amazing. That'd be huge progress, right? I mean, I think we can do a lot more than that, but.
Well, these are really good points. And I think I speak for the leaders of this to say that it's our highest priority to be jamming something down corrections throat. So I think we're we want to be supportive. So those are really helpful comments. And by the way, this council's open discussion. And so any kind of role that I've had, I want people to say, hey, this is getting out of balance, or we're headed in the wrong direction. So please speak up if that's the case. But I'll remind you what we're talking about right now is establishing a work group to let us see the bigger picture, not to come back and say this is what needs to be done, but these are the possibilities of doing it well, we think. And by the way, Chris, at least from my perspective, I see us coming back and saying, not this is what you should be doing, but these are some warrant further investigation based on their data, maybe based on our data, that because this is not something we should jump immediately into, but we need to make sure that we're pursuing a course that's the right course, both for corrections and for the individuals. So in fact, I would love to have one of the recommendations that says, I'm using this example. Washington State is doing this well. I suggest we have this individual join us in a Zoom conference and tell us why it works there and what are their lessons learned, what worked well, what didn't, sort of thing. I can see maybe it's worth, maybe for a few people to actually take a visit. I don't know whether we can find the money to do that and visit an institution and actually talk to people. If I learn, I mean, I'm constantly learning this, but in our meeting yesterday with you folks, there is no substitute for that discussion around the table for, and so at some point that may be valuable, but with technology, we can invite them to and teach us. And so that's what I'm looking to obtain. But also, Andrea, in your position, you've done a lot of research on this issue. And so don't feel like that you, in fact, I'm going to nominate you to be on this committee.
I'll try to keep up with my friend over here.
Please.
So
You might have others in UBC that
Yeah.
researching best practices.
I'm confident whoever we hire is gonna have some of that academic background and can be a good source of, and as a former legislative auditor, that was like our bread and butter, call all the states and try to figure out where the best practices are, and don't be afraid to lead out. Sometimes there's just a deficit and we can do better than that, right?
especially in Utah,
For
where
sure.
we concentrate on families and individuals anyway. So that's kind of my view. So you okay with that, Chris? Is that
Yeah,
let's give you some guidelines? Okay. So just to repeat, if you'd like to be on that committee or you have someone you'd like to nominate, feel free to. And Chris, you've got that same latitude too. Just coordinate with Jared. So, okay.
Sure.
Oh, Richard, you've been patient. Actually, you have a chat. But can we read your chat here?
Or you could tell us either way.
Richard, maybe off.
Oh, no, yeah, it was just a note, nothing pertinent other than just a thought.
Okay.
Just I think turning to private industry and looking at examples of those that have exceeded may be worth looking at here. I'm aware of a couple and I'm sure there's a lot more, but the Laney project and such has been really successful.
Excellent. And I'm gonna share it out here so that Chris can have it and the group that are gonna work on the research. Think about it and add that to our list of considerations as well. But groups that are having incredible outcomes that you mentioned, the Other Side Academy, the Laney Group, Hustle 2.0, other groups that are doing this with great success. I'll encourage our research group to look at that. And Aiden, again, also thank you for your comment there. Again, suggested that states like Colorado are doing some great work. The CDOC, what does that stand for? Colorado Department of Corrections. We've been working on increasing access and quality of higher ed prisons. They're collaborating with multiple. Dan, you want to be on this committee?
Sure.
I don't know. I guess that's up to Chris.
Sounds like a nomination.
I think you could do it. Our first objective is gonna be to watch a movie together. It's called College Behind Bars. It's a Ken Burns documentary. They actually have a debate team that outcompetes MIT. So like powerful things can happen behind bars, just in case you need a reminder.
That's on Netflix.
It was, I don't know, but I have access to it, so I can share that, I'm sure. I might ask permission first, but yeah.
So, and just mind sharing that link or whatever it is to
I'll follow
every
up.
member of the council?
It's a series, it's 4 hours time commitment. That's a lot, I get it, but it's all inspiration. It shows you that if you get education and access to the right people, changing, it is like really powerful.
Thank you.
Okay, so we got Chris leading out on the research, Andrea helping. And again, I don't know if I was just kidding or not.
I think you agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Either that or his boss will tell us yes or no.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm fine if he's fine.
I know you got a lot on plate, so anyway, at least just sharing ideas like that would be great, so. And then you got some folks at the education project that have been plugged in with that as well.
Okay. And then how do you like the idea, and I don't know whether, Andrea, you could help with this, having, Roxanne would be part of that, but maybe having a couple of other incarcerated students, that you know of, that, are we talking about some that are still incarcerated or some who have graduated? Who would be the most helpful to us?
We're interested in lived experience. And thank you, ladies, for that suggestion. I talked a few weeks ago about this. Let's look at the research, but also think about what's the actual experience.
So real quick, I think it would be a really great idea to have incarcerated partake in some fashion. We could work with folks who are in our program to liaison in some ways with the committee to at least give some feedback about in this research area. So I just wanted to offer that in our program, and we have students who I think would have a lot to add to this conversation.
Thank you.
Maybe work with Andrea to have a couple people come and talk about.
Can you assign it as a research topic paper?
Oh,
Sure.
I mean, I just a thought. I've attended some of the evenings where they present their papers and their work for UPrep, and it's like really impressive. They, in fact, what I want to mention is they have all these barriers. They don't get to use a laptop and do research with like EBSCO hosts. They have to like print it out, learn it directly. It's a harder path for sure.
they're on the PowerPoint. All right. We have a list of slides, so we just listed the groups.
Okay. So, do we have a list of the proposed work groups?
We do. If you look at the work plan that was attached to the agenda, we had a research and data set of things. Just ignore the red stuff on here. It's just noodling ideas. So if your name's on there. Educational programming to look at what's our curriculum look like. What is the what are the right combinations of educational programs to offer and to whom? Some of this is going to be driven by the research, but as you get into it, some of our education folks will have some good thoughts and ideas and what should we be focusing on in terms of which institutions are in here and what kinds of programs are we doing. So that's the educational programming. We have a set of issues related to funding, and that would include are there funding issues we get this session? What are the best ways to structure how the funding is done? Is the current method the best? We have 3 or 4 different current methods. We have a set for access and continuity. This deals with how we handle moves, how do we handle getting folks enrolled and assessed and in the right place, how to do case management, getting ready for life on the outside. A group of issues related to technology, the tablets, online learning. What are some ways that we can bring education into the facility with some technology? Industry engagement. How do we find employer felon-friendly employers and occupations? How do we align what we're doing there? So those are kind of identified as potential. With 6 of them, that's like everybody will have something to do, right?
So let me just say, I know that sounds like, but I think this will not be. I don't see this council being a rubber stamping. I think it's going to be engaged in work. That doesn't mean that you all need to be involved in every one of those working groups. And the nice thing about a working group is we can access resources that are not on council. So for example, Representative Ballard talks about, let's access our corporate technology citizens. Let's get them their work and help them leverage technology to find the right answers. And we can also find access to funding or support for funding by utilizing those citizens as well. So that I use that as an example. But what I'm going to, if it's okay with everyone, there's a lot on that list, but if we had Jared break that down in more of a concise email as those proposed working groups, you don't have to be on them all, and you don't have to be on more than have to be on any, except Chris has to lead that one because it's the statute chart. But let's find out what you'd like to do, and then we'll use that, and then we'll utilize our time to designate or decide who's can chair those groups. And by the way, a working group doesn't need to be large; it could be 2 or 3 people. So conceptually, are you all okay with that? Help us this workload that we have. And again, David, I'm reminded of your comment, not to impose all this burden on you all there, but to help refine, to support. So is that, are we headed the right direction? You okay with that? Is there a comment?
I have a comment.
Oh, okay.
Just, yeah, I think I would raise my hand.
So I got to tell you all a story about that raising your hand. My wife and I attended the Kane County Fair, and we were where they were bringing in the stock, and there were bids going on. And when she talked, she used her hand. She almost bought a pig during the bidding process. She raised her hand like to make a point to me, and almost, you know, $1,000. And I said, honey, what are we gonna do with this pig? You know, so anyway. So when you talk to your hand, you have to be careful.
Just kind of housekeeping, but as we're on committees, we can only have 5. I learned this in the last legislative council. And as you gather data and everything, and you prepare it to bring to the council, you can't share that like with the whole council at once because of Public Meetings Act violation. So groups have to be 5 or smaller, and their interaction needs to stay within the group until it's here.
That's 5 people or smaller.
5, yeah, but you have committees, yeah. Right? I'm trying to keep, that's what legislative research.
Yeah.
Stay out of jail.
Don't have a quorum.
Right. So what becomes public material is what is presented here. So in this meeting, whatever you present public, this committee is public.
So give us some good material.
Yeah.
Yes, and I actually did an interview with a reporter based on our last meeting here who reached out to me, which is great, right? The public is listening, they're engaged.
And that's a really good important point, that our meetings are public, and sometimes media is interested. So
We want to take a minute or two and maybe put down some names of
sure, if you're prepared to do that, absolutely. We'll give Jared some names right now.
educational programming. I'd like to see some input from both technical and education.
I'm sorry, I was looking through those. Say that again, and I forgot my hearing aids too. My wife would not be happy.
Borrow mine.
You repeat that.
Anyway, so no, we're looking to what committees some of you would like to be on. Maybe spend some time between now and next meeting, preparing through the issues on this list here, or whatever other issues there might be.
And I actually, Jared, did these handouts match? And are they what you were showing us there?
Yes, I inserted some
things,
other things on there that were still scratch paper kind of work. So if we look at educational program, I think we have at least somebody from technical education and someone from degree granting, and someone from our commissioner staff. So yeah. And for degree granting, I mean, we could use someone from the University of Utah, or SLIC, or Snow, or maybe some of each. Maybe we have each institution on our the program. Dave, does that seem like something for you or for Chris?
Yes.
That works on your team.
Yes. Well, and either myself or Chris. That's great.
All right, so let's put the 4 institutions on there. And then maybe Julie, you could recommend someone for academic
Yeah, it will either be Aiden or me.
And then we'll get some there from, yes. So education programs, access and continuity, this is what's going on to help students be successful. Maybe a lot of this is going to be UDC. So I don't know, Dan, if that's, are we overlapping topic areas there, or is there someone else that might?
I can help with access and continuity. I think that's where we're at, right? Okay. I would recommend Director Parrish approve this. I think that
They're like our unsung heroes on the education team. They were there scurrying about yesterday, but they didn't have time to really engage because they're just over their head busy. But I wanted to, they also don't love the limelight, but I wanted to highlight them and just acknowledge what rock stars they are for our division. They really amazing, dedicated, hardworking, all the things.
Is this a good one for Roxy to help us with? What's our experience with getting students into and through and access this?
You feel okay about helping us?
We'll make you come into things, you could do Zoom call or phone call or something. Funding on that, we're looking FAFSA, maybe this is done, I don't know.
Yes, except for that, we have a session ahead of us, so, it's like, you don't get in there early, you miss out on a whole year of potential.
Right. Anybody want to volunteer for it?
So, Andrea, I know, are we overloading you? What you said is
I
really
have to do
important, and
this
that is, even if
regardless.
it's short run, we need,
Yeah.
to you.
I mean, I'm in the process of doing a building block request right now, so I can initiate that process with the governor's office. I can't guarantee that it will be successful, but I'm gonna try very hard.
So, Representative Ballard, do you mind working with Andrea on that? Sure. And then you have a direct connection with a member of the legislature that can help push that through.
You have to remember the legislature actually controls the money.
I
not
know
the
this, but
governor.
it starts with the governor. They have to say, okay, we want to build you into our budget, right?
Yeah.
You have to get that priority first.
But Representative Ballard knows those people too, and so does Senator Owens, both of them do.
Yeah,
So.
and I'm sensitive in my position. I can't lobby for anything with legislators. I can inform, provide support.
But I'm also thinking about the education side. For example, Salt Lake Community College has a separate appropriation, right? In some of the university donor funding, maybe you're gonna be tapping into Pell. And maybe that doesn't, maybe that's not as critical going into legislature. So if you've got someone from maybe your institutions, doesn't have to be you or all the time, that you can help guide what needs to be done for funding. Are we giving you too much?
No.
We're looking for things that
Not at all,
discontinue,
not
right?
at all. In fact, just the opposite. I was actually thinking about someone that could be very helpful in this would be Marianne McKnight from Salt Lake Community College. She an associate who was influential in, with Tim, actually getting that appropriation so that Slick would get going. So she has quite a bit of experience and knowledge in that.
Technology.
So before we leave that, as I understand, I don't understand everything about the Pell, but I understand that there, in order for it to be successful, has to be some degree of state involvement. Am I right about that? Is it by institution? Is it by student? My understanding that there's some things that the state can do to help open those paths, but I may be wrong. What I'm saying, I guess, is there anything we need to be doing to make sure that we secure that for the institutions first? is that something we could look at just to make sure that, and maybe, Andrew, you already have that expertise, but
Actually, I have some. I want to be careful about the word I use. I'm excited for it, so I don't want to misinterpret, but I have some reservations about how are we going to organize ourselves and appropriately address all of the institutions of higher education that want to help our population with the Pell funding, but making sure that we're holding a standard that's high quality education and that is in its nature, not taking advantage of our population in any way, and just, but there's a lot of, and I've shared this guidance, the Very Institute has put some guidelines out there. A lot of states are trying to figure out this simultaneously. It's a hot topic right now. There's a lot of webinars, and I attended one last Friday. So this is an issue that is going to be pressing for this year. So probably something we can't afford to back burner, in my opinion.
mine as well. And that's why I'm saying, would you all, as part of this funding, take that on? And if there are resources of legislative level in our fiscal analysts or we'll help you access those. And Jared, if there are resources here,
Yeah, we got folks in that.
okay, let's make sure that they have the technical help.
And I think the key is doing what we're now doing at higher ed, which is consolidating scholarships, right? You have a process, it's like, it's this, and then this, and then this, and then this, for applying for to see what you're eligible for, to spit out one final, outcome, so that you're not trying to pull from lots of different things. There's actually a process that we can go through easier for the school counselors who are helping the inmates and so forth. We want to simplify this process, not make it more and more complicated.
So I'm going to nominate for you to speak Tim Sheehan too. So you mind working with him on that? Okay. On the funding. I just absolutely agree with you, Andrea. We can't, needs to be front and center, so.
It's just such a great opportunity. We want to capture it, maximize it, and also set us up to succeed, right? Our institution can't become completely lambasted with all this interest if we don't have a process laid out.
This is where higher ed can take and remove some challenges for correction. Because we have the systems already in place right through the commissioner's office. We have people who are well-trained in financial aid and how to access it. So and again, I'm gonna say it should go right back to the system that's already in place to help negate that rush to the Pell. And that should be through Salt Lake Community and Snow College. Because the two institutions in their areas, then they partner with, and they're already doing it with Davis. You guys already have articulation with Salt Lake. That's where the funding, you don't have to worry about it. The funding should flow through there. You just make sure that your inmates aren't taken advantage of or become a population that are just trying to get Pell money, right?
Well, I don't know what protections we have in place. Say there's an online university and they find out about it, they want to participate. I don't know that we can object to that, right? That there's still.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, my sense is, I don't know that you can object, but you can educate. And that's a powerful tool for, so.
And we're having experiences with that already with our students that are, frustrated because they haven't been able to get into classes because of the COVID restrictions. And so they contact us and say, okay, we're working with California Coast, for example, which is not regionally accredited and it's quite expensive. And so we do see those challenges. And I will, just to build on what you said, Representative Snow, the language that is articulated there, and I'm not sure how it's going to apply exactly with the general restitution, but we've been piloting that restitution of Pell. And the way they set that up is that programs are to, and that the restitution of Pell is designed to be used, and programs are to make sure that they supplement state funding, but not supplant that. And that's the language that is there. So,
and to that, we have state funding that has been already, it's not being used right now, but it's the Promise Scholarship. I don't know if it's being used in correction.
No, it's not yet.
So that is eligible to Captions, and it provides certification and up to 4 semesters for the associate degree. And if you, in those 4 semesters, you can get 2 or 3 certifications, that's fine. But that state funding has already been set aside.
So one question, then I think we can talk about some other committees, but right now, I don't know if it's in statute or just in rule or just, guidelines. Right now, students have to pay 50% up front, and then they have to do a promissory note when they get out, whatever they don't pay for it. Is that something that we need to change in statute, or where is that sitting, and how does that need to be changed?
My gut response without doing the research, and I could, is that that's probably not our biggest challenge right now.
But we do need to change it. I think that's my point,
I
right?
think,
So
I
how
think
do
we can review the promise. I mean, I think it depends on the will of our legislature. Do we believe that it's important that they have skin in the game, so to speak, and they pay for a portion of their educations, and how much, right? So I think that's a little bit of a policy decision. I'm hesitant.
But it is in statute, right?
There, yes.
Okay, so I think that's what our committee needs to discuss, but probably be prepared to make some changes for this legislative session. Okay, that's what I wanted to.
I actually, don't put me on the record there. I don't know that it might just be in our own policy, the restitution piece. So let me.
Double check.
I know it used to be
Statute.
policy. I know it used to be. It might have got, but not sure.
Okay, so Andrew, you're building a big agenda. Okay.
All right, yeah,
I'm gonna hire some help with that, so it's gonna be okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Tom, as well.
Industry engagement and technology, the other two.
Okay, industry engagement, I'd like to, Helen, would you be willing to help with that?
Absolutely.
That'd be terrific. And then if we may have some other nominations, but if you wouldn't.
I would like to consult with our talent ready team. The only thing they do is engage with industry and connect with education. So you have someone that can work with you on
That would be great.
on that.
And I'd also nominate Rich Christiansen. Rich, if you don't mind, you've got huge experience with that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Happy to do that.
The kind of thing that we're looking at is the legislation that, for example, that Senator Owens ran, direct engagement with one particular industry of construction. I think that kind of prompted it. Just quickly, what did you do? Tell them what you did.
Well, with Clyde Company and workers' compensation and another, we ran a bill that, I think this is what you're asking about,
Yeah.
that made it where companies cannot be sued for negligence just because they hired a felon. There has to be negligence. So companies like Clyde Company hesitant to hire anyone with felony because they could be sued. Now we put a little layer of protection in there that said you can, there has to be cause. I mean, if you took someone who was in for sex abuse and you put them in a daycare unit, absolutely you're negligent. But if they're running a construction team or working on staff, that not necessarily, so they should be able to go find. So you have these companies, and that's where Rich will be very helpful, that are gaining strength. They need employees, and they see the value in people like Roxy and others who can come out and be immediate, have career-long, family-sustaining jobs, and live the dream. So now they are a lot less hesitant to hire. We want to find more of those companies.
So that's one example. And Rich and Helen and your working group, if you could come back with some legislative things that could be done to help open those doors, we've still got time to work on that too. So anyway, the only other thing we haven't talked about is technology. I mean, we have.
That's someone to at least take a lead on that. So let's maybe small or for technology. It's the tablets, but it's also online education.
Anyone well connected with the Silicon Slopes organization? I've got some, you know what? I'll help lead that because I've got some connections there. And if anyone would like to work on technology with me, please let me know. I'd love to have some help.
I wonder if there's some talent that we have at one or two. I think all the institutions have some talent with technology.
Yeah.
But is there someone that one of you might suggest?
You know what, I would, if it's okay, I would recommend, I'll work with Dan on the committee that he identified, and let's put Dr. Bradbury with technology. He has quite a bit of knowledge and experience, and he would be a great help.
Perfect. That would be great.
And it might be good to pull in DTS, I don't know. DTS do stuff out there.
Right now, their full-time job is Fusion, that new electronic health record that we've adopted, but we do have DTS support. It's not sufficient for all the things we need right now, so it always takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's not their fault, it's just,
Okay. UEN.
Utah Education Network.
Yes, they could as well. And part of this will come from our best practices. We know that there are some institutions that somehow have figured out filtering and blocking, still utilizing open internet. But David, if you'll help me with Dr. Bradford's contact information, and Andrea or Jared, if you'll follow up with who your contacts might be at UTN or DTS, that would be helpful.
If I could, Representative, I'm gonna add, it could be one of two people, but at Snow College where they do the statewide concurrent enrollment, they hybrid it and record it, so it could go.
Okay.
One of them be on that.
That'd be great. And I know we're limiting them, but we've got this institution down my way called Utah Technology University. Utah Tech, yeah. Anyway, that's who's delivering content right now for our secure kids in secure care, and they've come a long way on that issue too. So I can get one of them.
I love that.
Okay. All right. I know this sounds like we've had a whole lot of ideas, and you're all going to walk away saying, but you know who's good at boiling this down is Jared. So he's going to help us boil this down into something we can get our arms around. And but I think the strength of our group is going to be the work that's done in these small working groups. So thank you for your willingness to help in that. Are we winding down here?
I think so, but maybe just to kind of recap where we are, what are our next steps. I wonder if it's possible in the next meeting, just maybe look at the low hanging fruit and come back with what are some of the research best practices. Is that too soon or?
No, we can do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's.
That'd be great. So
You can delegate a lot.
did we miss this?
No, that's just the back of the minutes.
Okay.
You get a scratch paper.
Oh.
Okay.
It looked like some important data. Okay.
And then as far as the other work groups, I wrote down some names. I'll confirm with you what we thought we were.
Jared, can I just add one, sorry to back up on the work groups. I wonder if it might be appropriate if I at least participated in some degree in the funding one, only because I was part of the group that got that chunk of money from BYU, and public-private partnerships might wind up being part of this. So caveat, not this church or anything like that. All of their funding mechanisms are, to me, a black box in another black box, you know, on the dark side of the moon. But it might be good to have some of that perspective.
You okay with that, Chris?
Yeah.
Please do. And
I don't think any of us are going to turn down help.
You're right.
Thank you.
so
Yeah, if we can be ready for whatever seems to be the emerging research. Spend some time in the next meeting on that. Plus, if we can have each of the committees at least touch bases with each other between now and then, maybe it's possible to have at least some of them identify some of the strong issues that we look at. it seems like we've had some conversations about some of those already. As we do the boil then.
So Representative Ballard, Senator Owens, myself, and Jared are going to be literally within the next few days. And we're going to make sure that we populated these to the extent that we know, and we'll get that back out to you in terms of these working groups. And if we miss something, that you can look at and see whether we missed anyone or you have any nominations. We can do that quickly.
You got, your work plan is just kind of the starting point.
Can I also make a request? I mentioned kind of getting a list of your barriers and your suggestions, perhaps for September. See what you can do to put those things down. I think, you know, like I remodeled a home a couple of times, and every Monday morning, what's your punch list, right? I think if we have it written down, it's gonna be a lot easier to address what some of the barriers are and what we can start knocking the lowest hanging fruit to knock off the list or to at least address rather than just talking about it. But your suggestions, always up for the, you know, how can we implement, and some ideas, some suggestions we can take, some we can't, but I think that may help on a regular basis for us to continue to, and we can combine those and see what we can start knocking off the list.
Thank you, Representative Bell. So Andrea, I know this is also kind of short notice, but when you said there's some funding issues that are, do you think you could help us outline, look at those in our October meeting as well? Just the ones that we need to be addressing soon.
And as far as the building block is concerned, it's really exclusively around funding our tablet program ongoing because we've never identified a source of funding. So that can be a component. I don't think that's the whole of our funding needs, but it was something that my executive team felt comfortable approving and having me pursue with the governor's office. So
That's great. So let me just tell you this. A building block is harder because it's ongoing.
Yeah.
But what we're going to have in this session, can we turn off the mic? We're going to have some one-time money, and there's going to be a lot of demands on it. But if there's some one-time things that can be done, let's identify those really quickly. And
Such as one tablet per inmate.
I love that goal.
I
Let's
prefer
find
that
out
to
what-
be in industry partners.
That could be
Rather
industry
than the
partners.
state,
but I
right? We
would-
don't know what the cost is yet
We
until
don't.
you present it.
I'm just saying, let's get that in the pipeline. And sometimes industry partners takes a long time, especially if they're having to develop and that sort of thing. But these folks already have a system. And if we can not duplicate that, but if we can double those, and we can do that with one-time funds, let's get that in. And so don't look at this as we can't ask. You really need to do what Representative Ballard says, Senator Owens. Tell us what you need. That's one of our big jobs here that we see. I think that we see is help us help anyway. So that will be our October meeting. In November. We'll have. We're going to be reporting to the legislative interim committees. That's the education committee, which is my committee, and also higher ed. Jared will help us work those up. We'll talk about the strategic priority gaps and recommendations. So that's on the research and data work group. So we may revisit that twice a little bit, Chris. The tactical gaps and recommendations, budget recommendations will continue. We'll make sure that we give space to those both in October and November so that we're queued up for this session. And even though I won't be in the legislature, I feel strongly enough about this. If you guys say to me, Larry, come up and testify, I'll do it. So, okay? All right. I've been moving quickly because you know what? I've got a flight home and I don't want to miss it. So. We need to talk about as a council, anything I haven't. Anything, Tim, from your panel down there, any of you? Okay. Chairs, anything?
I just want to say that it's nice to feel the shift toward our incarcerated population. And we've worked as a legislature, all of you know, it's been in the newspaper, there's been challenges to try to recruit and retain our employees. But that facility out there was built for the inmates and to help them correct their behaviors in life and be productive in society like we have here. So I love this talk of it. All our efforts are about that.
Thank you, Sam.
I think as you can see, I'm leaning on a lot of your expertise. I feel that writing things down and collaborating with all of us and understanding how we can really think about things new is the exciting part of this committee. That's COVID kind of did it to everybody. How do we need to rethink how we're approaching? And so this is great with the new prison, and appreciate everybody's expertise at the table.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you again. My message was one of gratitude for your input, council. It is so important. The statement is often said, how we treat our most vulnerable population is evidence of how well we're doing in leadership. I count these in many ways as the most vulnerable, like our minor children, like those who are incapacitated, but those who made some mistakes but are still redeemable. So thank you very much. With that, we'll take a motion, final motion from someone. It's the motion is called a motion to adjourn. Oh, do we have anyone, no one here in this room, anyone online from the public that would like to comment? Not seeing any hands, no indication. So thanks for that reminder.
Representative, I don't know if this is a good time to comment. I just wanted to say hello to all of you, if that's okay.
Absolutely, Sam. From Utah State University, am I right?
Yes, sir. Utah State University. Thanks for remembering me. I was going to remind you that I met with you last summer when you were putting this legislation together. And
I remember. I'll never forget it.
I had a great time, and I think I've met with, from that meeting, I was encouraged. I've met with half of you that ended up in this council. So I'm very passionate about the topic you're working on, and also very knowledgeable. This is my second year. I transferred from Texas A&M over in Houston, my wife and I. And after meeting with you, I went on to start a pilot at our local, I call it jail/prison. I'm in San Juan County, so it's a jail that has a contract with the state. And so we're teaching a course there, and it went well in the spring, and we're concluding the one for the summer. So I just wanted to share that there might be other people like me who are very passionate about what you're doing, who are not maybe represented in the discussion. If you have an interest in reaching out and making sure that everyone helps with the work that you're doing, that's something that would be helpful. This is my extension project. I teach criminal justice and juvenile justice in the classroom for Utah State University, but I have an extension role to work with the counties, and I've been able to reach out and see that there is a demand. If we would use a business language, there's a strong demand for post-secondary correctional education. And so I just wanted to say thank you for bringing attention to this matter, and I love what I'm hearing. We're expecting a baby in 2 weeks. So I was at the doctor's office, but I tuned in quietly on my phone so I could listen in, and I'm really, really excited about the direction this council is going, and I'm pledging my support and help whatever I can, maybe through the work groups that you have formed. We could contribute our experience and expertise and resources that hopefully would make your job a little bit easier. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to hopefully working with you.
Thank you, Sam. And we're making note of your offer to help. And I think, Chris, you know Sam, I know him. So thank you so much. And by the way, you invited me. You said you would invite me to come up and talk to one of your classes about juvenile justice. So I'm still waiting for that invitation, Sam.
I will send it out today. We're starting next week, but we would love to have you and anyone else that you want to bring. I'm teaching 4
Okay.
different classes and I would love to have you and in all of them. Yes, sir.
And so,
How many committees does Sam have?
yeah, exactly. Senator Owens has a comment.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for what you're doing. I think that everybody has the same heart and mind here to move this. And you just reminded me of a young man who is enrolled. He's beginning, he has a place on campus. He's beginning at Snow College this year. He's 33 years old. He's been on drugs on and off since he was 14. And I was an ecclesiastical leader for a while, visited him in jail every week for 6 months and watched him go through some rehab programs. But here he is, a registered student. He got his GED 2 months ago. And he started that in corrections. And he's been working on it since. And he just has a goal to be a productive member of society and have a family someday. But it's generational change. So what you're doing, Sam, and the rest of you will change lives.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. The final motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Have a second? Second, Andrea, non-debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, stand adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a nice week and a nice weekend.
Good flight,